asked to talk about being a Christian in France. And I was going to concentrate on being a Christian man in France. This world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me, I'm not sure that that's scriptural, from heaven's open door. And I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Now, Christians in France, as Christians in Scotland, are in a very similar situation in some points of view. We live in a country where there are more and more laws being passed, which are anti-God, anti-Christian, anti-Bible. There are more and more people who are allowed free speech, but Christians somehow are not allowed free speech. And even in churches, if we're preaching on some ethical subjects, if there's someone in the church who records my message, they can go to the police, and literally the church will be closed within hours, and the preacher, if it's me or someone else, will be taken to the police station to explain why do you have such a hate speech against these groups. So it's a different situation, but very similar in some ways, I think, to the UK, where there is less and less tolerance for the gospel. So it's difficult to be a Christian in France when you talk about some ethical or practical or political questions. There are differences between France and Scotland. One big difference is in France, the evangelical churches are growing. There are 2,500 churches, evangelical churches in France today. They may vary from 10 to 500 members. Very few have 500 members, very, very few. But there is church growth in France. 2,500 churches. 500 years ago, there were 2,000 churches, evangelical churches in France. But they nearly all disappeared through persecution. And it's just now that we've started to grow with the last 50, 60 years, and there is more and more vision and blessing through the sharing of the gospel in France. A second difference between France and Scotland is that if you see an evangelical church in France, you'll see 99 cases out of 100, you'll see the word Protestant in the name. You'll see the name will probably be Evangelical Protestant Church or Protestant Evangelical Church. Now that does shock some people in the UK, in Scotland and in Ireland, but we use the word Protestant in nearly all our churches because the evangelicals, well, nobody knows what an evangelical is. And if we use the word Protestant, many people know, well, there's Christians, there are Catholics, there are other people called Protestants, and it allows us to explain who we are and who we are not. Now, we don't emphasize the word Protestant. We emphasize the word Christian, if you want. But that allows us to explain who we are and who we are not. And when we compare ourselves with the Roman Catholic Church, people say, oh, the Catholics, the Roman Catholic Church. So many scandals, sexuality, immorality, priests who have been accused of being pedophiles. Hundreds have been accused. The Catholic Church in France has to pay out millions of pounds, or euros, I should say, to people who have been victims of priests who have sexually abused these people when they were children. And some priests are in prison, some bishops are going to prison, and some priests have committed suicide. The priest in the town next to us was accused of being a paedophile, and a few days after being accused, he hung himself. I just asked our church to pray for this man, and a few days later, it was in the newspaper, he had hung himself. But I say all that just to say that we use the word Protestant. So if you see, I'll be showing in different churches over the next 6 weeks a short film I've made of our ministry, and you'll see different churches with the word Protestant. But it's just to explain, or helps us to explain to people who we are. When we do talk to people about who we are, we always bring them to the importance of the Bible. And we talk about what we say is the 3 A's. We acknowledge the Bible is the Word of God. We accept the teaching of the Bible from A to Z. And we apply the teaching to our own lives. Acknowledge, accept, and apply. And I've not met one single Roman Catholic priest in France, and I've met a lot, who can say the same thing. Acknowledging that that is the Word of God, accepting it, and applying it to their own lives. A third difference between France and Scotland is kissing. In France, although it's with COVID it all stopped, but it started again. Now, if you feel called to France, don't come because you want to kiss everybody. But in some areas, you kiss twice, once on each cheek. In some areas, you start on the left cheek, others you start on the right cheek. You just need to know what cheek you start on, or you give a headbutt to the man or the lady in front. In other churches or areas, it's 3 kisses. Where we used to be in the west of France, 4 kisses. So if you arrive late for a meeting, and there's a row of 25 seats, and the only seat empty is the end one, then you would come in and you would kiss 24 people 4 times. And if it's during a quiet time of prayer, everybody hears 96 kisses. That happens. That's just culture. 3 main differences. There are others. One of our ministries over the last few years has been organizing marriage enrichment seminars. Now, this is a series of 6 afternoons that another couple and I organize, and that we, with another couple, we organize, and we give out the publicity, and we ask the couples who come to commit themselves to the 6 afternoons over a period of 18 months. We give the dates, and they must say, okay, we'll come to every meeting. It's a Sunday afternoon from 1 till 6. And the idea is that we compare married life with a garden. So the first session, we talk about preparing soil in your garden before you plant something. A tree, fruit, carrots, flowers. You've got to take out the stones and prepare the land. And as a Christian couple, there are sometimes stones, weeds you have to take out of your life in order to grow as a couple, as a Christian couple. The second session, 3 months later, we talk about sowing seeds. So we always have the allegory or the image of a garden, and then we talk about married life. Sowing seeds. What kind of seeds do we want to sow as a couple? And during these sessions, there's a time of teaching, biblical teaching, a time of discussion, a time of prayer. There's always 1 or 2 sketches to get the message home. And people talk, and share often many personal situations. And people know that what is shared will not leave the room. Everyone promises strict confidentiality. The third session is keeping the garden in order. You've got to prune, you've got to weed, you've got to protect your garden from insects, etc. And then we say, okay, you've got to protect your married life. What are the dangers? What does the devil want to do in lives of Christian couples? How can we protect ourselves? Very practical, very down-to-earth teaching. The fourth meeting is reaping what has been planted. Okay, we planted seeds, we're protecting what's growing, and then we're going to reap. Well, what kind of fruit do we want as a couple? If we're parents, what kind of fruit do we want our children to see? And there's good fruit, and there's bad fruit. So we often have a list of all the good aspects of fruit we want in our lives, and a list of all the bad aspects. And again, discussion, questions, answers, and prayer together. Then we have another session. Okay, you've got a garden. You'll need to build a fence around the garden because you don't want anyone to come into your garden. So again, as a Christian couple, okay, what are the dangers for us? What kind of fences? What should we put round our couple, our family, in order to protect us? And then the last session is concerning about sharing the fruit from your garden, giving fruit and veg to neighbours, to the needy, to the family. And the whole idea is hospitality. Are we a couple who are given to hospitality? Should we open our door to everyone, to anyone? Should we always have people for a meal every night of the week? Etc., etc. So this has been going on for 8 years now, and we have 6 couples with us from different nationalities. We've got a couple from Rwanda, a couple from India, an Italian couple, and an Algerian couple, and then there's Bridget and myself. So that's been a really encouraging and enriching ministry, because we want these couples who come with us for these 18 months to encourage other couples that they know from their own churches to watch over their married life. Because you know as well as I do that many Christian couples have difficulties, separation, divorce. And we want to help couples in that situation. Another thing we've been learning over the past few years is learning to be patient. We moved to the city of Lyon 10 years ago, and we're working part-time with one church, and we've got an itinerant ministry where every second Sunday I preach in another church elsewhere in France. When we arrived in the church where we are, I got friendly with a young guy. Today he's 45, 20 years younger than me, more or less. And I thought, this guy's got potential. I'd like to suggest meeting up with him to pray, to read the Bible, to study together. His wife was more committed than he was in the local church. And I thought, it'd be good if I could help him to grow. But the opportunity, I just didn't feel that it was the right time to do so. So I prayed for this guy, and I prayed and I waited for 6 years. Then something happened, and I knew that was the time I should start to suggest to meet up with him. 4 years ago, his wife had their 3rd child, who was born after less than 6 months of pregnancy. The boy was touch and go his life for weeks and weeks. And the father, this young man who I wanted to get alongside, was completely broken. Completely broken. His wife, stronger than him, but he was completely shattered by the Lord. In Isaiah 57, there's a word, lowly in spirit. And lowly in Hebrew means being smashed to smithereens. And he was completely broken by the Lord. And he contacted me. And he asked me to come and pray with him, not knowing if the baby was going to live. They had chosen a name for the baby, thinking that he would be born 3 months later. And then they changed the name to call him Emmanuel. So once the baby was more or less out of danger, we still met regularly. And then Bridget and I went to see this couple. And I said to the guy, I would like to spend time with you, because you need to become a disciple of Jesus Christ. You're a Christian, but I'd like to help you to go further with Christ. And I said, I've been praying for 6 years for this opportunity. His wife started to cry. But David, I've been praying for years that someone would do that with my husband. So I said, don't decide tonight. Talk with your wife, think about it, pray about it, and let me know. Within a few days, he contacted me, and to get a long story short, we decided to meet every week, the 4 of us, because his wife wanted to be part of it, and I wanted my wife to be there with his wife. So the 4 of us started to meet every week, and we went through every book in the Old Testament, every book in the New Testament. I think we started with the New, then the Old, and then I said, okay, what would you like to do? He said, I'd love to read with you the book of Daniel. Oh, I wouldn't have chosen Daniel. Anyway, he did. So we went through Daniel every week. Then James's epistle. Then the Colossians. And people in the church didn't recognize this guy. And 3 months ago, he was named an elder in the church. And I say that because I wanted to start with him 10 years ago. But if I did, then I'm sure it wouldn't have worked out. It wasn't the right time. I waited, and I'm not very patient as a person. You can ask my wife about that, and my kids. But I had to learn to wait for the opportunity. And we would never have imagined that his baby, born after less than 6 months of pregnancy, would have been the means that brought him really to walk with the Lord. So if you think of someone you could help, wait for the right moment. Pray for patience, and the Lord will lead and open doors. Another situation where we had to learn to be patient was we had a lady in the church, a German lady, married to this Muslim for over 40 years. And we knew that there was a lot of tension between him and her. She had been converted a few years earlier, came to church every Sunday, and I had a real burden for her husband. And I really wanted to go and visit him and just to preach Christ. But it wasn't right. You can't do that. You've got to wait to be invited. You've got to wait for the right opportunity. So one day his wife phoned us and said that her and her husband would like to have Brigitte and myself for a cup of tea. So, okay, their invitation, we went for the cup of tea and cake, and we were sitting on the couch. He was sitting on the end of the couch. The wife was sitting in front of us, and she talked for about 2 hours. Now and again, now you can't imagine a woman talking for 2 hours. That doesn't exist. But anyway, she did. And now and again, he would interrupt her. And she, the Christian, would really speak to him in a kind of nasty, angry way. And I just thought, oh, the testimony, this is awful. So anyway, afterwards, we went, had a cup of tea and a bit of cake, and then we said goodbye. And often in these visits, I asked to pray with the person. But with the atmosphere in the house, I just didn't feel, if I suggest to pray, it'll be a disaster. But he took me in his arms and thanked me for coming. And during the time there, he shared that he had cancer of the throat and other things. He'd been a smoker for 60 years. Anyway, so, okay. A few weeks later, she phoned me again, this lady. They said, could you come back and see me and my husband? And that morning, when I was praying to go, I knew I must read the Bible today with them. So we went, had a cup of tea, and the atmosphere was much warmer. With him, we spoke a lot about football. He liked sport, and we talked about different things about sport. Went through to the kitchen for the cup of tea, and then I said, listen, he was called Abder Adam. Listen, Abder, I'd like to read the Bible and pray with you before I go. Is that okay? And he said, oh, yeah, sure. First surprise. So what I did was I just quoted 2 or 3 verses from the Bible. Didn't want to take out my Bible and read, so I said I'll just quote some verses. I prayed just for them, for him and his health, and for his soul. And when I opened my eyes, his wife was crying, my wife was crying, he was crying. And he took me in his arms and said, please come back and see me. So got a long story short, 1 or 2 other men from the church went to visit him, and he came to the Lord. Within weeks, he was in hospital, knowing that he was going to die. The imam, the kind of religious, the Muslim leader, went to see him because he was an Algerian Muslim, and said, I've heard you become a Christian. He said, yeah. He said, well, you must become a Muslim again, because if not, no Muslim will come to your funeral. He'd been in the same flat for 40 years. And Abder Adam took out of the cabinet beside his bed in hospital the New Testament. He said, this is my book. Jesus is my Lord. And the man went away angry, of course. A few days later, he did die. He had asked me to do the ceremony, but not one neighbor who was a Muslim came to his funeral. But he came to the Lord, and it was just at the Lord's timing. Once again, I could have invited myself years earlier and insisted that I go and see him and read the Bible and preach, but that wasn't the time. We have to learn to wait and to be patient and to wait on the Lord's time. Learning to be patient. This morning I talked about church elders who we visit, who we try and help in different churches in the country. Another part of our ministry, and Bridget is very involved in this too, is mentoring younger believers. Every week, Bridget meets up with one or two ladies, single, married, different age groups, but younger than her on the whole. And I meet up regularly with younger men. And these are people who have contacted us and who have said, we're looking for a spiritual big brother or big sister. Could you be my spiritual brother? So when people do that, then I always say, okay, put down in writing exactly what you want. So one guy wrote, well, I would just like to read a book with you and talk about the book, chapter by chapter. Another guy said, well, I would like to go through a book in the Bible. Another guy said, I would like you to give me homework on Bible texts. And another guy just said, well, I just want to have someone to speak to and just to say where I am, my problems, and have someone to pray with me and for me. So we meet up with different people, different stages in life, and we just spend, it's usually an hour. We have a kind of unwritten contract of strict confidentiality. And I would say to a young guy, I'll feel free to ask you any question, but you can feel free to ask me any question. You can't do that with everyone. So we meet for an hour and a half. There's always timed. We know when we start, we know when we end. It's always on the same day, not like some elders meetings that I talked about this morning. And people just would say, okay, I don't read the Bible. Where can I start? How can I organize my quiet time? David, I want to pray every morning for 5 minutes before going to work, but how can I pray? What do I pray about? Basic discipleship questions. Someone else came and said, I have difficulty with my wife. Here's the situation. Or with my in-laws. That's very rare, of course, but here's the situation. Can you help? Can you come and meet them? Now and again with some people, we meet and we analyze the sermon the previous Sunday. Okay, what were the main points? What was, how did you feel? Was it well prepared? Was it well delivered? Etc., etc. Now and again, we'd meet with people who would want to talk about addiction. Addiction to Netflix series or other series on different platforms. I can't spend an evening without watching 4 hours on TV. Or addiction to internet games with a special, what do you call it, a pseudonym and with passwords. People who would talk to us and say, I've got a problem with anger, with swearing. David, I've been a Christian for 10 years. I'm an elder and I swear. Can you help me? Well, we say only the Lord can help you. But we're there to listen. And then the people want to be accountable. So the following week, okay, how many times have you sworn since we last met? They want us to ask questions. A problem with pornography. You'd be amazed how many elders in French churches have or have had a problem with pornography, whatever form that may take. Social media, SSA, same-sex attraction. An elder came and said, David, I'm attracted to men. I'm married, I've got kids. But there's some men in our church, and I just feel attracted towards them. He's got to be brave to say that, and then to be willing to listen to what the Bible says and how to help him. So we meet up with different people, and we just try to help. So that's just normal Christians, in inverted commas, if a normal Christian exists. It's not church leaders, it's just people who want to get help in their Christian life. I remember talking with one couple, and they said, we're so tired. Just a young couple. We're just so tired. I said, well, what do you do now? You both work? Well, the guy said, well, on Monday night, I go to sport. On Tuesday night, my wife goes to sport. On Wednesday night, we get a babysitter in and we both go to the cinema. Because in France, every Wednesday, the new films come out in cinemas. On Thursday night, we have a meal with the in-laws. On Friday night, we have a meal with the other in-laws. And on Saturday night, we just have an evening with friends. So often on a Sunday morning, we're just so tired. And these are people who sometimes only work 35 hours a week. A law came out in France 20 years ago that allowed people to work 35 hours a week, which meant that they would have one day off every fortnight. And most people asked for the Monday or the Friday to have a long weekend. But many Christians who did that said, a long weekend, okay, let's go away every fortnight for a long weekend. So they're not at church. Difficult. And we're trying to encourage these people, look at your timetable and, devote time to your family, to your wife, to your husband, and to your church. Because some of these people we very rarely see at church, even though they only work 35 hours a week. So these are different situations that we're in, that we're going through, but that the Lord's called us to be involved in. Now, I think I'll maybe close there. We've got loads of time. I don't know if there'll be time for questions, but I'll let Ewan look after that. But thank you very much for listening to what I had to say.